Have you ever watched someone break their own heart just to keep their dignity? Imagine standing in a room full of people who despise you, facing the man the universe destined to be yours, and watching him choose power over love. Most would beg. Most would scream. But Serafina Davis did the one thing Alpha Kalen never expected. She smiled, accepted his rejection, and walked away. He thought he won. He thought he was free. But he forgot one thing. When you reject a mate given by the moon goddess, you don't just break a heart. You ring a dinner bell for the monsters in the dark, and the Alpha King, he was starving. The chandeliers in the Silver Moon packhouse were shaking. That's what Serafina noticed first. Not the thrumming bass of the music, or the overpowering scent of expensive perfume mixed with roasted venison, but the way the crystals trembled above. It felt like a warning. Serafina Davis, known to most simply as Sarah, or the kitchen girl, adjusted the tray of champagne flutes in her hand. She wasn't supposed to be in the main hall. She was an Omega, technically a pack member, but treated more like indentured staff because her parents had been rogues who died owing the former Alpha money. Tonight was Alpha Kalen Reed's ascension ceremony. He was officially taking over from his father. Kalen was 24, handsome in that rugged, I own the world sort of way, with jawline sharp enough to cut glass and eyes the color of stormy seas. Every unmated female in the pack was preening, hoping to catch his eye. Sarah just wanted to finish her shift and go back to her tiny room above the garage. Keep the glasses full, Sarah. Don't stare at the guests. The head of hospitality, a harsh woman named Brenda, hissed as she passed. Sarah kept her head down, weaving through the crowd. But as she approached the dais, where Kalen stood laughing with his beta mic and the pack's golden girl Lydia Hart, the air in the room suddenly changed. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was like a thunderclap in a library. Sarah froze. The tray in her hand rattled. A scent hit her. Cedarwood, rain, and something electric, like ozone. It was the most intoxicating thing she had ever smelled. Her wolf, usually dormant and quiet, woke up and howled a single word, "Mate!" She looked up, gasping. Across the room, Kalen Reed froze mid-laugh. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His storm-grey eyes locked onto hers across the sea of formal gowns and tuxedos. The room went silent, not because they knew, but because the Alpha's power flared so violently it sucked the oxygen out of the space. "Mine," her wolf purred. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the fairy tale, the moment every wolf girl dreams of. She was an Omega, yes, but the mate bond superseded rank. It was sacred. Fate had chosen her for the Alpha. She took a tentative step forward. "Kalen?" she whispered, though she knew he could hear her with his enhanced hearing. Kalen dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stared at her, but there was no love in his eyes. There was no awe. There was horror. He looked at her faded waitressing uniform, her messy bun, the scuffed shoes. Then he looked at Lydia Hart standing next to him. Lydia, whose father was a wealthy donor, who was wearing a red silk dress that cost more than Sarah would earn in a lifetime. Kalen's lip curled. He marched down the steps of the dais. The crowd parted, sensing the intensity. Sarah's breath hitched. "He's coming to me," she thought. "He's coming to claim me." He stopped 2 feet in front of her. The smell of him was overwhelming, making her knees weak. She looked up, eyes shining. "I, Kalen Reed," his voice boomed, deep and authoritative, carrying to every corner of the silent hall. Sarah smiled, tears forming. "Alpha of the Silver Moon pack," he continued. "Yes," she breathed. "Reject you, Serafina Davis, as my mate." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It felt physical, like a blow to the stomach. Sarah didn't breathe. The connection that had just snapped into place, that beautiful golden tether binding their souls, suddenly turned black and withered. Pain, sharp and agonizing, tore through her chest. It felt like her heart was being ripped in half by a dull knife. The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted immediately. The Omega! He rejected her. Thank the goddess. Imagine an Omega Luna. Kalen stood tall, his face a mask of cold stone, though a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. The rejection hurt him too. It always hurt both sides. But he shoved it down. I need a Luna who brings strength and alliances to this pack, Kalen said, loud enough for everyone to hear, justifying his cruelty. Not a charity case. He turned his back on her. He reached out and took Lydia Hart's hand. Lydia smirked, a cruel, victorious thing, and leaned into him. Escort her out, Kalen ordered his beta, Mike. Mike looked uncomfortable. Alpha, maybe. Now! Kalen roared, his voice cracking slightly. Sarah stood trembling. The pain was blinding. Her wolf was whimpering, curling into a ball to die. But as she looked at Kalen's back, the back of the man who was supposed to protect her above all others, something inside her snapped. It wasn't a snap of breaking. It was the snap of a lock opening. She straightened her spine. She took a deep breath, forcing the agony into a small, tight box in her mind. She wiped the single tear that had escaped. No need, Beta Mike, Sarah said. Her voice was clear. Steady. Kalen stopped. He turned around slowly, expecting her to be on her knees, expecting begging. Sarah looked him dead in the eye. She didn't bow. She didn't tremble. I, Seraphina Davis, she said, her voice ringing out with a strange, harmonic resonance that made the crystals shake again. Accept your rejection, Alpha Kalen Reed. Kalen flinched. The bond severed completely. Usually this takes days to fade. But Sarah severed it instantly with her acceptance. I release you, she said, her eyes devoid of warmth. May you find everything you deserve, because you just lost the only thing that was truly yours. She dropped her serving tray. It clattered loudly, the champagne flutes shattering around her feet. She stepped over the broken glass, head high, and walked out the front doors without looking back once. The pack went silent. And for the first time in his life, Kalen Reed felt a cold chill of fear crawl up his spine. The next morning, the Silver Moon pack was in chaos. Usually, a rejection ceremony, even an informal one, was followed by a celebration if the Alpha chose a better mate. But there was no celebration. The breakfast hall was quiet. The Omegas in the kitchen whispered in hushed tones. Sarah was gone. Her room above the garage had been cleared out before sunrise. She had taken her meager savings, an old backpack, and vanished into the tree line. Kalen sat at the head of the table, nursing a coffee. He looked terrible. His skin was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Rejecting a fated mate had consequences, a drop in power, a physical sickness, but he had expected it to be manageable. It wasn't. He felt hollow every time he looked at Lydia, who was currently clinging to his arm and chattering about redecorating the Luna's suite. He felt a wave of nausea. Kalen, babe, are you listening? Lydia snapped her gum. I said we should burn that garage apartment. It smells like wet dog. Kalen slammed his mug down. Enough, Lydia. The room went deadly still. Before Lydia could argue, the ground began to vibrate. It started as a low hum, rattling the silverware on the tables. Then came the sound of engines, heavy military-grade engines. Beta Mike burst into the dining hall, looking terrified. Alpha, you need to come outside, now! What is it? Kalen stood up, thankful for the distraction. Rogues? No, Mike swallowed hard. It's the Obsidian Guard. It's the King. The color drained from Kalen's face. King Alaric Blackwood, the Alpha of Alphas, the ruler of all packs on the continent. He wasn't just a king, he was a myth. They said he was over 300 years old, sustained by dark magic or a lichen bloodline. They said he was mad. They said he hadn't left his fortress, the Obsidian Keep, in a decade. Why was he here? Kalen rushed outside, followed by the pack. A convoy of 5 matte black SUVs idled in the pack square. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids. The license plate simply read K01. The doors of the lead car opened, and 4 guards stepped out. They were massive, at least 7 feet tall, wearing tactical gear and dark sunglasses. They didn't smell like normal wolves. They smelled like ash and blood. Then the rear door of the middle car opened. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a bespoke black suit that cost more than the entire pack house. He was tall, lean, but corded with muscle. His hair was black as a raven's wing, and his skin was pale. But it was his eyes that terrified everyone. They were violet, a vivid, glowing purple that marked him as a royal lichen, King Alaric Blackwood. Cailan stepped forward, bowing his head, though his ego hated it. King Alaric, we weren't expecting you. To what do we owe the honor? Alaric didn't look at Cailan. He stood by the car, tilting his head back, inhaling the air deeply. He looked like a predator scenting prey. Something happened here, Alaric said. His voice was low, smooth like velvet, but it carried a terrifying weight. Last night, Cailan swallowed. I ascended to Alpha last night, Your Highness. We had a celebration. Alaric lowered his gaze to Cailan. I didn't feel an ascension, boy. I felt a fracture. He began to walk towards the pack house. The crowd parted instantly, wolves whimpering and exposing their necks in submission without even meaning to. The king's aura was suffocating. It felt like gravity had doubled. Alaric stopped exactly where Sarah had dropped the tray the night before. The glass had been swept up, but a faint stain of champagne remained on the marble. Alaric crouched down. He touched the floor with long, elegant fingers. A bond was broken here, Alaric whispered. He stood up, turning to Cailan. The violet in his eyes swirled. You rejected a mate. She was an Omega. Cailan defended himself quickly, his voice rising. A runt. She wasn't fit to be a Luna. I chose Lydia, a beta of high standing. It was a strategic decision for the good of the pack. Alaric laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Strategic. He walked up to Cailan, invading his personal space. Alaric smelled of ancient forests and cold iron. You threw away a gift from the goddess because of strategy? Alaric mocked. Then his expression hardened. But that is not why I am here. When the bond snapped, it sent a ripple through the ley lines. It woke me up. Alaric leaned in closer. The wolf you rejected. What was her name? Sarah, Cailan said. Seraphina Davis. Alaric froze. For a moment, the king looked almost stunned. A flicker of raw emotion crossed his stoic face. Davis, Alaric repeated. And where is she now? She left, Lydia chimed in, annoyed that the king was ignoring her. She ran off like the coward she is. Probably gone rogue by now. Alaric's head snapped toward Lydia. He didn't growl. He didn't shout. He just looked at her. Lydia fell to her knees, gasping for air, clutching her throat as if an invisible hand were choking her. Lydia! Cailan shouted, moving to help her. Touch her, and I take your hand, Alaric said calmly. Cailan froze. Alaric looked back at the forest line, the direction Sarah had gone. You fools, Alaric murmured. You didn't just reject an Omega. He turned back to his guards. Find her. Tear down this forest tree by tree if you have to. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will slaughter this entire pack. Cailan was trembling now. Why? Who is she? Alaric opened the car door, pausing before he got in. He looked at Cailan with pity. She is the only thing keeping the madness at bay, Alaric said enigmatically, and she is the only woman who carries the blood of the winter moon. That's a myth, Cailan whispered. The winter moon pack was destroyed 20 years ago. Yes, Alaric said, his eyes glowing brighter. I know, because I'm the one who destroyed it. And I thought I killed them all. The car door slammed shut. The convoy peeled out, tires screeching, heading straight for the forest. Cailan stood in the driveway, the blood draining from his face as the realization hit him. He hadn't just rejected a nobody. He had rejected the survivor of a royal massacre, and the king wasn't coming to save her. He was coming to finish the job. Or so it seemed. The forest was not kind to the broken-hearted. It had been 6 hours since Serafina walked out of the Silver Moon packhouse. The adrenaline that had allowed her to stand tall and reject her alpha was long gone, replaced by a gnawing, icy hollowness in her chest. Rejecting a fated mate was unnatural. It was like tearing off a limb. Even though Kaelin had started it, Sarah's acceptance had finalized the severance. Her wolf, a small white thing named Luna, ironic, she always thought, was currently comatose in her mind, refusing to communicate. Sarah stumbled over a root, her knees hitting the damp earth hard. She gasped, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. "Get up," she whispered to herself. "You didn't survive the fire just to die in the mud." She adjusted the straps of her backpack. She had no destination. The only plan was away. Away from Kaelin's pity, away from Lydia's cruelty, and away from the suffocating life of being a servant in her own home. She was 10 miles past the pack border, in the neutral lands, a lawless strip of territory between the packs. It was dangerous ground. Rogues, exiles, and criminals roamed here. Sarah stopped. The hair on her arms stood up. The woods had gone silent. The crickets had stopped chirping. Crack! A twig snapped to her left. Sarah didn't panic. Panic was for people who hadn't spent their childhood hiding in floorboards. She dropped into a crouch, sliding a small silver knife from her boot. A keepsake from her mother. "Come out," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "I can smell the cheap tobacco from here." Laughter echoed from the trees. 3 men stepped out from the shadows. They were rough, their clothes stained with grease and old blood. Their eyes held the yellow glint of wolves who had lost their humanity. "Look at this, boys," the leader sneered. He was a brute of a man with a scar running through his left eye. A little Silver Moon princess all alone. "I have nothing for you," Sarah said, gripping the knife. "Let me pass, and I won't hurt you." The leader laughed harder, slapping his thigh. "You? Hurt us? You smell like an Omega, sweetheart, and you smell like rejection." He sniffed the air theatrically. "Sour, bitter. Daddy Alpha didn't want you." "That makes you fair game," the second rogue said, licking his lips. "Omegas fetch a high price in the underground fighting pits. They last longer." They circled her. Sarah calculated the odds. 3 male wolves. She was 1 female, weakened by a broken bond. But they made a mistake. They assumed she was just an Omega. They didn't know her bloodline. They didn't know that the Winter Moon Pack wasn't just known for their white fur. They were known for their speed. The leader lunged. Sarah didn't scream. She moved. She dropped to her knees, sliding under his outstretched arms, and slashed her knife across his hamstring. The leader howled, collapsing as his leg gave out. "Bitch!" he screamed. "Get her!" The other 2 transformed mid-air, shifting into large, mangy wolves. They came at her from both sides. Sarah scrambled up a tree, swinging off a low branch to kick the first wolf in the snout. He yelped, disoriented, but the physical exertion cost her. A wave of dizziness hit her, the side effect of the severed bond. Her vision blurred. The third wolf, the largest of the 3, slammed into her side. Sarah flew backward, hitting the trunk of an oak tree with a sickening crunch. Her ribs screamed in protest. The knife flew from her hand. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The large wolf loomed over her, shifting back into human form. He was grinning, revealing rotting teeth. "Feisty," he grunted, pinning her shoulders to the tree. "I like breaking the feisty ones." He reached for her throat. Sarah closed her eyes. She summoned the last of her strength, preparing to claw his eyes out, when suddenly the man stopped. His hand hovered inches from her neck. His eyes went wide, the pupils dilating in sheer terror. He wasn't looking at Sarah. He was looking behind her. The forest temperature dropped 10 degrees in a single second. Frost began to creep rapidly across the ground, turning the mud into rock-hard ice. The birds stopped singing. The wind died. A sound vibrated through the air, a low, rhythmic thrumming. It sounded like a heartbeat, but slow. Terrifyingly slow. "Royal!" the rogue stammered, backing away from Sarah. "Royal Lycan!" Sarah turned her head painfully. Emerging from the mist, walking as if he owned the very earth beneath his feet, was King Alaric Blackwood. He was alone. No guards. No backup. He walked with his hands in his pockets, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his violet eyes glowing like neon lights in the dark. "I believe," Alaric said, his voice soft and terrible, "that belongs to me." The three rogues scrambled to regroup. The leader, still clutching his bleeding leg, looked at Alaric with a mix of fear and stupidity. "This is neutral land," the leader shouted, trying to sound brave. "King or not, you have no jurisdiction here. She's our catch." Alaric stopped 5 feet away. He looked at the leader the way a human looks at a cockroach. "Jurisdiction," Alaric mused, tasting the word. "I am the king. My jurisdiction is wherever I choose to stand." He took 1 step forward. The pressure in the clearing increased tenfold. Sarah felt it. It was like being at the bottom of the ocean. It was Alpha Command, but distilled into its purest, deadliest form. "Kneel," Alaric whispered. Crack! The 3 rogues fell to the ground instantly. It wasn't voluntary. The force of his command shattered the bones in their legs. Their screams tore through the silent forest. Sarah watched, horrified and mesmerized. She had heard stories of the Lycan King's power, but seeing it, feeling it, it was primordial. Alaric didn't even look at the screaming men. He walked past them, stepping over their broken bodies as if they were fallen logs, and stopped in front of Sarah. Sarah pressed her back against the tree, clutching her bruised ribs. She looked up at him, trembling. This was the man who had massacred her family's pack. This was the monster of the north. "Are you going to kill me too?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alaric stared down at her. Up close, his face was devastatingly handsome, but it was the face of a statue. Cold, unmoving, timeless. His violet eyes scanned her injuries, the bruise forming on her cheek, the way she held her side. His nostrils flared. A muscle in his jaw ticked. "Kill you?" Alaric repeated. His voice sounded strained, like he was holding back a tidal wave. He reached out a hand. Sarah flinched, closing her eyes, expecting a blow. Instead, she felt warm fingers brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. The touch was shockingly gentle. And then, something impossible happened. As soon as his skin touched hers, the overwhelming pressure in the air vanished. The frost on the ground stopped spreading. The violet glow in his eyes dimmed to a deep, human purple. Alaric let out a long, shuddering breath. It was the sound of a drowning man finally breaking the surface. "Quiet," he murmured to himself. "It's finally quiet." He looked at Sarah, and for the first time there was confusion in his expression. "Who are you?" he asked. Not as a king, but as a man bewildered. "Why do the voices stop when I touch you?" Sarah blinked, confused. "The voices?" Before he could answer, the rogue leader, fueled by adrenaline and stupidity, shifted into his wolf form despite his broken legs. He lunged at Alaric's back, jaws snapping. "Watch out!" Sarah screamed. Alaric didn't turn around. He didn't even look. He simply extended his other hand backward, caught the wolf by the throat midair, and squeezed. There was a wet crunch. The rogue went limp instantly. Alaric tossed the massive carcass aside like a rag doll. He never took his eyes off Sarah. "You are hurt," he stated. "I'll heal," Sarah said, trying to stand up. She wobbled. The world spun. Alaric caught her before she hit the ground. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly, holding her against his chest. His suit smelled of expensive scotch and ozone. "Put me down," Sarah protested weakly. "I'm an Omega. I'm not. You can't be seen carrying me." "I am Alaric Blackwood," he growled, pulling her closer. "I do what I want. And right now, I want to know why a Winter Moon survivor was hiding in a kitchen." He began to walk, carrying her back towards the road. "Wait," Sarah gasped. "The other rogues." Alaric paused. He glanced over his shoulder at the 2 remaining rogues, who were whimpering on the ground, trying to crawl away. "Leave them," Alaric said coldly. "The scent of their leader's blood will attract the bears. Let nature finish them." He walked her out of the woods. As they reached the road, the convoy of black SUVs was waiting. The guards stood at attention, their faces masking their shock at seeing their king, who famously touched no one, carrying a dirty, bruised girl in his arms. A tall woman with severe glasses and a tablet stepped forward. This was Raven, Alaric's gamma and personal handler. "Sir," Raven said, eyeing Sarah with suspicion, "your levels were spiking. We detected a code-red, uncontrolled release of energy. Are you—" "I am stable," Alaric cut her off. He looked down at Sarah, who had passed out in his arms from exhaustion. "Prepare the medical suite on the jet. We are returning to the Obsidian Keep." Raven's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't take a stray to the Keep. The Council will do as they are told," Alaric snarled, his eyes flashing violet again. "She is not a stray." He looked at Sarah's sleeping face, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. "She is the Silence," he whispered, "and I am never letting her go." Meanwhile, back at the Silver Moon Pack, Kalen was tearing his office apart. "Where is she?" he roared, throwing a heavy oak chair across the room. It smashed into the wall, splintering. Beta Mike stood by the door, looking pale. "We can't track her, Alpha. The rain washed away her scent, and the King's convoy was seen leaving the sector." Kalen gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. Since the moment Sarah had left, the relief he expected to feel hadn't come. Instead, a deep, rotting paranoia had set in. He couldn't focus, he couldn't sleep, and when he tried to be intimate with Lydia, her touch felt like sandpaper. It felt wrong. The King took her, Kalen realized, horror dawning on him. He took her to kill her, to finish the Winter Moon line. "Maybe that's for the best," Mike ventured cautiously. "If she really is from that bloodline, she's dangerous. You dodged a bullet, Kalen." "No," Kalen whispered. He touched his chest, where the mate bond used to be. The empty space there was aching, throbbing like an infected wound. He remembered the way Sarah had looked at him before she left, the dignity, the strength. And then he remembered Lydia's shrieking laughter. "I made a mistake," Kalen said, the realization hitting him with the force of a truck. He looked at Mike. "Get the trackers. Get the car." "Alpha, you can't go after the King," Mike argued. "That's suicide." Kalen looked up, his eyes wild. "She accepted the rejection, Mike, but I never finished the paperwork. Technically, she is still a member of this pack." He grabbed his coat. "The King has my Omega, and I'm going to get her back." Sarah woke to the smell of lavender and antiseptic. She wasn't in the garage anymore. She was lying in a bed large enough to sleep a family of 4, covered in sheets made of silk so fine they felt like water. The room was massive, constructed of dark obsidian stone, but warmed by a roaring fireplace that took up an entire wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a jagged mountain range covered in perpetual snow. She sat up, gasping as her ribs twinged. They were bandaged. In fact, all her cuts were treated with glowing blue salve. "You're awake." Sarah jumped. Sitting in a wingback chair in the corner, shrouded in shadow, was Alaric. He wasn't wearing the suit anymore. He was wearing a loose grey sweater and black lounge pants. It was jarringly domestic for a man she considered a mass murderer. Sarah scrambled backward against the headboard. "Where am I?" "The Obsidian Keep," Alaric said, standing up. He moved with that same predatory grace. "My home." "Why didn't you kill me?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. "You killed my parents. You killed everyone in the Winter Moon Pack. Why save me?" Alaric stopped at the foot of the bed. His expression darkened, a look of ancient pain crossing his features. "Is that what they told you?" "I saw the smoke," Sarah spat, tears welling up. "I was 5 years old. I hid in the cellar while your guards burned our village." "I burned the village," Alaric corrected her softly, "to contain the scourge." Sarah froze. "The scourge?" Alaric walked to the window, looking out at the snow. 20 years ago, your Alpha, your father, made a deal with a dark sorcerer to increase the pack's power. He wanted to challenge me, but the magic was tainted. It turned your people into things. Mindless, rabid beasts that felt no pain and only hungered for flesh. It wasn't a pack anymore, Seraphina. It was a plague, he turned back to her. I didn't go there to conquer. I went there to stop the infection from spreading to the rest of the werewolf kind. I had to kill them. They were already dead. Sarah stared at him. She wanted to scream liar, but deep down a memory surfaced. Her mother's eyes turning black, her father foaming at the mouth, locking her in the cellar and whispering, "Don't let them hear you." But you... Alaric stepped closer. You were untouched. You were the only one immune. I didn't know you existed until the fires were already burning. When I found the empty cellar, I thought you had perished. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. You have the true winter blood. It acts as a dampener, a silencer. A silencer for what? Sarah asked. Alaric tapped his own temple. For the noise. Every Lycan king is cursed with the voices of the ancestors. Thousands of alphas screaming in my head, driving us to madness. It's why we usually die young or go feral. It's called the Fury. He sat on the edge of the bed. He looked vulnerable. For 10 years, I haven't slept more than an hour. The noise is constant, screaming, rage. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers. May I? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Alaric placed his hand on hers. Instantly his shoulders dropped. The tension left his face. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Silence, he whispered. When I touch you, they stop. Sarah looked at their joined hands. A strange warmth, different from the mate bond but equally powerful, flowed between them. It felt like peace. So I'm just a pill to you? Sarah pulled her hand away, feeling a sudden flash of hurt. A sedative? Alaric's eyes snapped open. They were violet again, swirling with emotion. No, he growled. You are the only person in 300 years who has looked at me without fear. You rejected an alpha who didn't deserve you. You faced down 3 rogues with a pocket knife. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. You aren't a sedative, Seraphina. You're a miracle. The moment was shattered by a loud banging on the heavy oak door. Raven, the Gamma, burst in. She looked panicked. My king, she gasped. We have a problem at the gate. Alaric stood up, his face instantly hardening into the mask of the king. What is it? It's the Silver Moon Alpha, Raven said, glancing at Sarah with pity. Caelan Reed is here, and he's brought the council's enforcers. Sarah's blood ran cold. He says... Raven hesitated. He says you have kidnapped his pack member, and he has the legal paperwork to prove she belongs to him. The throne room of the Obsidian Keep was a cavernous hall of black stone, lit by floating braziers of blue fire. Alaric sat on the throne, a massive chair carved from a single piece of meteorite. Sarah stood beside him, dressed in a simple but elegant black gown Raven had found for her. She felt small, but Alaric's hand rested on the armrest near her, a silent promise of protection. The heavy doors groaned open. Caelan Reed strode in. He looked better than he had in the woods, shaved, dressed in his alpha uniform, but his eyes were manic. Behind him walked 3 members of the High Council, elderly wolves in red robes, carrying heavy leather books. King Alaric, Caelan bowed, though it was stiff. You are harboring a fugitive of the Silver Moon Pack. Alaric didn't stand. He looked bored. I see a free woman who accepted your rejection, pup. She is no pack's property. That's where you're wrong, Caelan said, a smug smile touching his lips. He pulled a document from his jacket. The rejection ceremony was verbal, Caelan announced, his voice echoing off the walls. According to Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Werewolf Code, a rejection is not legal until the Alpha signs the severance papers and submits them to the Council. He waved the paper. I never signed them, Syrah gasped. You rejected me in front of everyone. You humiliated me. I was emotional, Caelan said smoothly, looking at her with a twisted sort of longing. I made a mistake, Sarah. I realized it the moment you left. You are my mate. Fate decided it, and legally, you're still a member of my pack. I am ordering you to return home. One of the council elders stepped forward. The Alpha is correct, Your Majesty. By law, Serafina Davis belongs to the Silver Moon Pack. If you refuse to return her, it is an act of war against the council laws you swore to uphold." Alaric's hand gripped the obsidian armrest so hard the stone cracked. "You want to talk about laws?" Alaric's voice was a low rumble that shook the floor. "You rejected her. You broke her heart. You cast her out. And I am here to fix it," Kaelin shouted, his composure slipping. He looked at Sarah, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, please. Lydia meant nothing. It was just politics. I fired her. I sent her away. Come home. You'll be Luna. You'll have everything." Sarah looked at Kaelin. A week ago, this offer would have been her dream. But now, looking at him, she saw a weak man. A man who needed a piece of paper to own her because he couldn't keep her with love. Then she looked at Alaric, the king who was vibrating with rage, holding it back only because he didn't want to scare her. "I won't go," Sarah said clearly. "You have to," Kaelin snapped. "It's the law." "The law," Alaric said, standing up slowly. The room darkened. The blue fires turned purple. "I wrote the law," Alaric snarled. "Sir," the council elder warned, stepping back. "If you break the code, the other alphas will revolt. You cannot start a war for one Omega." "She is not an Omega," Alaric roared. The sound hit them like a physical wave. The windows shattered. The council members fell to their knees, covering their ears. Alaric's control was slipping. The fury was waking up. "Alaric, stop!" Sarah grabbed his arm. But it was too late. Alaric turned to look at her, and his eyes were entirely black. No whites, no irises. Just the void. "They want to take you," Alaric said, his voice distorted, sounding like 1,000 voices speaking at once. "They want to take the silence." He looked at Kaelin. "I will kill them all." Alaric shifted. It wasn't the shift of a normal wolf. It was an explosion of muscle and bone. He grew to 9 feet tall, a monstrous bipedal lichen, covered in midnight black fur, with claws as long as daggers. The council members screamed and scrambled backward. Kaelin shifted into his grey wolf, but he looked like a puppy compared to the monstrosity that was the Alpha King. Alaric lunged. He backhanded Kaelin across the room. Kaelin smashed into a stone pillar, whimpering, bones shattering on impact. "Alaric!" Sarah screamed. The monster turned to the council members. He raised a clawed hand, ready to disembowel the elders. If he killed the council, he would become a tyrant. The entire werewolf world would hunt him down. He would be lost to the madness forever. Sarah didn't run away. She ran toward him. "Get back! He's gone feral. Everyone, fall back!" The scream came from Raven, the king's gamma. She was already moving, her hand flying to the high-caliber firearm strapped to her thigh, though her hands trembled. In the history of the Obsidian Keep, the king had never fully lost control in the throne room. To do so now, in front of the High Council, was a death sentence for his reign, if they survived the next 5 minutes. The room had dissolved into absolute chaos. The obsidian pillars groaned under the pressure of the king's expanding aura. Alaric was no longer the man in the suit. He was a creature of nightmare. His body had contorted and swelled, shredding his clothes as thick, midnight black fur erupted from his skin. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, a hulking mass of muscle and ancient rage. His snout was long and terrifying, filled with rows of teeth designed to snap bone like dry twigs. But the worst part was his eyes. The intelligent violet gaze was gone, replaced by a hollow, consuming black void. The voices, the thousands of dead alphas screaming in his mind, had finally taken the wheel. Kaelin Reed, currently in his human form and bleeding from a broken nose where the beast had backhanded him, scrambled backward across the polished floor. "Kill it! Earth!" He shrieked, his voice cracking with terror. "Shoot him down! He's a monster!" The council elders, usually so dignified in their red robes, were huddled behind the throne, whimpering like pups. They knew the legends. A feral lichen king didn't stop until everything breathing in the room was dead. Raven leveled her weapon. "I have to put him down," she yelled, tears of frustration in her eyes. "He's going to kill us all." "No," the single word cut through the cacophony of growls and screams. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Serafina didn't retreat. She didn't look for cover. While every trained warrior in the room was backing away, the former kitchen girl was running forward. She hiked up the hem of her black gown and sprinted directly into the shadow of the monster. "Sarah, don't!" Kaelin shouted, though he made no move to save her. Sarah ignored him. She ignored Raven's warning shot that pinged off the stone ceiling. She stopped inches from the beast. The monster roared, a sound that wasn't just noise, but a physical vibration that rattled Sarah's teeth and threatened to stop her heart. Hot, metallic-smelling breath washed over her. The beast raised a clawed hand, the size of a dinner plate, ready to swipe her out of existence. Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't close her eyes. She looked up into those soulless, black pits. "I know you're in there," she whispered, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her stomach. The claw began to descend. Sarah threw her hands up. She didn't try to block the blow. That would be suicide. Instead, she slammed her palms flat against the monster's heaving chest, directly over the thundering drum of his heart. "Alaric, listen to me." She closed her eyes and reached for that deep, cold place inside her. The heritage she had denied for 20 years. The winter moon. She visualized the snow of her childhood. She remembered the silence of a forest after a heavy snowfall, where the world is muffled, white and peaceful. "Quiet," she commanded mentally. "Be silent." The reaction was instantaneous. A shock wave of frost exploded from her palms. It wasn't just cold air. It was tangible, magical ice. It encased the monster's chest in a glittering armor of rime, spreading rapidly down his massive arms and up his neck. The temperature in the throne room plummeted 20 degrees in a second. The beast froze mid-strike. The ice hissed against the supernatural heat of his rage. For a moment, time stood still. The monster looked down at the tiny woman, whose hands were freezing his fur. He blinked, and the consuming blackness in his eyes flickered. "You are not alone with the voices," Sarah said, her voice echoing with a strange, harmonic resonance that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "I am here. I am the silence. Give the rage to me." The beast let out a long, shuddering breath that fogged the air. The tension drained from his massive frame. Slowly, agonizingly, the bones began to rearrange. The fur receded. The claws retracted. Alaric collapsed forward. Sarah caught him, or tried to. His weight drove them both to the floor. She sat there on the cold stone, the king of werewolves with his head in her lap, his body shaking with the aftershocks of the transformation. He was human again, shirtless and scarred, gasping for air as if he had just surfaced from drowning. He opened his eyes. They were violet. The madness was gone. "You!" Alaric rasped, his voice wrecked. He reached up, touching her cheek with a trembling hand. "You stopped it. The noise, it's gone." "I told you," Sarah whispered, brushing sweaty hair off his forehead. "I'm not leaving." The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the whimpering of a council elder. Then a laugh broke the mood. A bitter, jagged sound. Kaelin stood up, wiping blood from his mouth. He looked at the scene, the powerful king reduced to a trembling mess in the arms of a servant girl, and his ego, fractured and desperate, tried to salvage the situation. "Look at him," Kaelin scoffed, though he kept his distance. "He's unstable, he's weak, and you, Sarah, you're protecting a beast who will eventually tear your throat out." He turned to the council. "You saw that. He endangered the High Council. By law, he should be stripped of his crown. And she—" he pointed a shaking finger at Sarah. "She is my property. I am taking her back to Silver Moon, where she can be detained for her own safety." Alaric tried to rise, a growl building in his chest, but Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay," her touch said. She stood up slowly. The ice that had coated Alaric's fur seemed to linger around her now. Her eyes were hard, lacking any of the warmth they had shown the king. "You want to talk about the law, Kaelin?" Sarah asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. She walked toward him. Kalen stiffened. "You brought the council here to enforce the code," Sarah continued. "You claimed that because you never signed the rejection papers, I am still a member of the Silver Moon Pack. Is that your argument?" "It is," Kalen said, lifting his chin. "You belong to the pack. You belong to me." "Good," Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just led prey into a trap. She reached into the pocket of Kalen's discarded jacket, which lay on the floor near the pillar, and pulled out the crumpled rejection document. She held it up for the council to see. "Witness this," she declared. "The Alpha confirms I am a sworn member of his pack." "Yes, yes, get on with it," the head elder muttered, still dusting off his robes. "Then, as a sworn member of the Silver Moon Pack, with royal blood flowing in my veins," Sarah said, her voice turning to steel, "I invoke the right of challenge." The room gasped. Kalen's face went pale. "The right of challenge," Sarah clarified, "allows any pack member to challenge an alpha who is deemed unfit, weak, or dangerous to the pack's survival. If the challenger wins, they take the alpha power." She dropped the paper and stepped closer to Kalen. "You rejected your fated mate for political gain. You attacked a king in his own home. You endangered your pack by starting a war you cannot win. You are unfit." "You can't," Kalen stammered, backing away. "You're an Omega. You're a girl. I am the last daughter of the Winter Moon," Sarah said. She raised her hand, and the air around her fingers crackled with frost. "And I challenge you, Kalen Reed. Right here. To the death." Kalen looked at her. He saw the power humming beneath her skin. Power that had just brought a Lycan king to his knees. Then he looked behind her, where Alaric was standing up. The king wasn't interfering, but his violet eyes were locked on Kalen, promising unspeakable torture if Kalen so much as scratched her. Kalen realized the truth. He wasn't fighting a kitchen girl. He was fighting a queen backed by a monster. If he fought, he died. Kalen's voice failed him. He looked at the council, searching for help, but they turned their faces away. He slumped, the arrogance draining out of him like dirty water. "I forfeit," Kalen whispered. "Louder," Sarah commanded. "I forfeit," Kalen screamed, tears of humiliation streaming down his face. "I withdraw my claim. I forfeit the title. A forfeit in a death challenge is absolute," the head elder intoned, his voice solemn. "Kalen Reed, you are stripped of your rank. You are Alpha no more." Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't cheer. She simply looked at the broken man who had been the center of her world for so long, and felt nothing. No hate. No love. Just indifference. "I have no desire to lead your pack," Sarah said coldly. "I transfer the Alpha title to Beta Mike. He has been running the pack while you were busy chasing your ego anyway." She turned her back on him. "Now get out, before the king decides he's hungry." Kalen fled. He ran from the hall without looking back, a rogue in all but name, stripped of dignity, mate, and title. Sarah exhaled, her shoulders sagging as the adrenaline faded. She felt strong arms wrap around her waist from behind. Alaric buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent, lavender and winter snow. "You challenged an alpha for me," Alaric murmured against her skin. "I challenged him for us," Sarah corrected, leaning back into him. Alaric turned her around. He looked at the council, then at Raven. "Let it be known," Alaric announced, his voice regaining the deep, commanding timbre of the king. "The Silver Moon Pack is under my protection, and Serafina Davis is no longer an Omega." He kissed her forehead, a gesture of reverence. "She is my queen, and the silence that saved the world." And that is how Serafina Davis went from a rejected kitchen girl to the queen of the werewolf world. She proved that your value isn't determined by who rejects you, but by who accepts you, and more importantly, how you accept yourself. What do you think? Did Kalen deserve a worse punishment, or was living with his failure enough? And would you have forgiven him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay wild.